Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachael Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. Well, we're back, Dan, to talk about...
Not doing well.
To try to offer, we're going to revisit where we were talking about just some of the impact of trauma on the body, focusing more today on what are some of the steps, what are some of the options available to us in this particular season of some trauma overload.
Wait a minute. Good Lord. Does that mean we're going to be practical?
Yes, we are going to try.
Okay.
For the first time in our lives. No,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's always helpful when you're moving into more practical spaces, especially for Dan and I, because I think we'll try to be as comprehensive as we can be, is this is not you need to be able to do all of these things. This is let's talk about a lot of different options and ways and start where you can. And again, we're in the realm of being faithful in the small. And as we mentioned, if you were listening last week, we mentioned that sometimes the ways we are invited to tend to our bodies in the midst of trauma, to tend to each other's bodies in the midst of trauma can feel like it can feel so small when the need is so great. So we are asking you to suspend the cynicism and have an imagination that sometimes being faithful in the small has huge implications. And so we are going to spend some time providing some practical tools and practical, I think, even categories to be thinking in with regard to the way trauma impacts the body. Again, this is not comprehensive. It's more general. So there's ways to get a lot more nuance into some of these categories, depending on your body and your community and your access to care. And again, as we ended our time last time talking about, it's the kindness of God that actually brings about the kind of transformation and healing that we're meant for. So our prayer would be that ultimately your posture would be a very gentle posture and just beginning to take the next step. My husband keeps saying that to me. He's offering me really good containment in this season. He keeps saying, well, all we can do today is take the next step. And I'm like, you're right. And so it's kind of our hope and our posture in the midst of this conversation is what could be some possible next steps.
Well, first and foremost, let's not be too practical, but let's start with the issue of Neoplatonism.
Oh gosh.
And the reality that, look, we're swimming against thousands of years of trauma being addressed, first of all, never being named, but heartache, struggle, crisis, being handled first and foremost spiritually, these are spiritual issues you need to grapple with in order to trust God. And the notion that, no, wait a minute, the small begins with our body. Our faithfulness begins with what we do with the fact we're bleeding out right now. Yes, there are spiritual, relational, psychological, sociological, cultural issues that need to be addressed. Can we begin with your body? And if not, and let's go a bit further, and to see it not as just kind of like all right, but an actual faithfulness to God to engage our body in a way in which we are honoring the reality that we are the temple of God and that our body is a reflection of the glory of God, not merely a husk that burdens the real reality of our world. So to tend to our body is not an easy thing on many levels, but particularly in the believing community, it ramps against what has been a theoretical predisposition for a lot of centuries. So that wasn't too practical, was it?
Yeah, when you were like, we're going back to Neo, I was like, well, okay, so we're going to start. We're going to start there. I think I would just say, and I this is what you're saying, Dan. I just want to name it explicitly. To tend to the body is actually inherently spiritual, cultural. It's all those things, and it's a starting point. And so, but it goes against how we have been taught to think and how we have been taught to even experience our bodies.
Well, and one thing we have learned through the understanding of the brain in the last 20 some years is that one of the only deep connections or highways between our cortical system, our thinking brain, so-called, and our limbic system, our so-called, our feeling brain, is our ability to do what's called interoception. And you don't have to remember the word, but the bottom line is it's the ability to listen, which is so fascinating. The ability to listen, to be attentive to your body, to become aware of what your body is experiencing. And so if we're going to deal with trauma, we have to begin with this concept of interoception. Will you stop? Remember what we talked about, the autonomic nervous system, and that when you get ramped up, your sympathetic system keeps pumping out the biochemicals, the stress biochemicals, particularly epinephrine, and cortisol. But in that process, when you're ramped up, the last thing you in the middle of fight or flight have the ability to do is to stop and listen and to take in attentively what your body is experiencing. So you have to, in some sense, make a choice to actually bring the parasympathetic system into play. And we'll talk about meditation. We'll talk about yoga. We'll talk about a lot of different structures. But the first thing is, will you sit? Will you put your feet on the floor? Will you listen to how your breathing is occurring? And just attentiveness, mindfulness, it's so fascinating. Just that stance and orientation begins to lower the level of that cortisol pulse. If you begin to listen, what you're often going to find is something very distressing.
I was going to say, I have a lot of tools in this tool bag over many years, and I am struggling to stop and listen because it's overwhelming what comes when I stop and listen. So I have found I actually can't sit still, and I actually have to do that kind of listening while walking. But I'm wondering if we can, because I want to be able to talk about some of those really simple tasks. Because I think it can be so distressing when you're like, oh yeah, I'm not taking deep breaths, but I actually don't know how to take deep breaths right now. And being quiet and being present with my thoughts actually feels impossible, or I don't know where to start, or I don't know what to do when they come. Right. So.
Well, and I concur, because there are times where I'm so ramped up that Becky and I have to take a walk. But what she's so wise to do is, when we're particularly in a place that has beauty and goodness, particularly in a forest setting, she'll say, I need to stop and sit down for a minute. And I'm like, no, let's keep going. She sits and all right, I'll sit. But even in 1 minute, I can begin to feel in my body what I wouldn't be feeling if I were walking. So if you can't sit, then walk. But as you're walking, as you begin to, walking slowly, not fast, not for exercise, but you're going to begin to come down a bit. And when you do, can you take the next step? And that is perhaps walk a little slower, and then come to a point where you just stand. And then maybe from that, sit. So in other words, there has to be elemental progression of faithfulness to the small, and then to the next step, as you put it so well, or at least your husband has put it so well. So part of the category here is, can we begin to feel in our body, listen to where we feel tension, where we feel fear, loss, anger, rage. And it's pretty uncommon for us to feel all those emotions in one particular part of our body. I'm not going to say it can't happen, but I feel fear in my neck. I feel grief in my lungs. I can feel rage in my hands and my calves. So where in your body are you beginning to metabolize all that's stirring? Swirling is a better word in the middle of trauma. And your ability to attune to that literally begins to change the parasympathetic process so that there is a slowness. But again, there may be a heightened arousal because you're beginning to feel things you don't want to feel. Now you're ramped up. Can you come back and walk? At least until you come to a point where there's a little bit more of a setting. So what we're actually beginning to invite you to is it's a kind of patience, a care, an openness that begins to disrupt that sympathetic fight-flight process that only adds to more allostatic load and therefore to a heightened level of debt that you are incurring. So will you tend to what you're feeling and begin to bring maybe very fragmented language, but a word or two to where your body is experiencing that wide array of feeling?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, like even as you're talking, and I know all these things, like we teach this, we talk about this, we do this labor. It's like, it is, I feel in myself like, well, then what am I supposed to do? I like get in touch with all the things I feel that like I already kind of know, but then I'm more aware. So then it does feel like it might increase the panic or the sense of powerlessness because how am I supposed to tend to it all? Mm-hmm. What resources do I have? What do I do when I'm in a context where everyone else needs the same amount of care? And so like we're kind of starting at a deficit together. You know, it's like I could see how that can feel almost like counterintuitive. Like, why would I do that? Because then I might feel worse.
I almost want to say you will feel worse because the ability to step out of that numbness where you're beginning to actually take some level of control over your body doesn't feel good, certainly not at first. And that's where we come back to this notion of, as you become more attuned, you better know how to breathe. And I remember saying to somebody, like it's in my 50s when we began talking about this, and I said, I've been breathing for about 6 decades now. I think I got a pretty good clue. And the guy said, no, look how shallow your breathing is right now. So what I'm saying is, as you tune in through interoception, you have to begin the process of knowing you're going to feel activated. And in that activation, I need to breathe. And again, we're not going to do it. Visually, you can't see me, but you can take in breath in 3 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds. A kind of a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, particularly through your nostrils. And then you can hold it, not like you're going underwater, but don't breathe out quickly in a count of 2, 3. And then to breathe out slowly through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look, this was a process that occurred for me after I came back. I said last week about the garage and coming back in going, what was I going to the garage for? And when Becky said, did you get it? I just felt panic. Like, what's going on? Thank goodness what she looked at me and said was, breathe. And I took it seriously. And I didn't do it immediately, but I sat down and I went through this process, 3 or 4 seconds in breathing, holding, breathing out. And I did it about 5 rounds. And what I began to feel was just a little bit of calm. So what we're asking in the middle of trauma is, if you're not creating times like this, particularly when you're overwhelmed, but we're going to give other directives here, but it's so basic that I fear that many of us are not doing the very simple things that can lower our parasympathetic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I would just add a caveat here. I don't think we have to talk long about it, but as someone who has had seasons where my anxiety is to the point that no amount of breathing is actually going to help because I can't breathe, I can't get the breath in, I think I would just say, if it's not clear, we are very pro therapy, and we also are very pro you getting help from medical professionals for sometimes needing extra support to manage your biochemicals when they get really disordered and really out of whack because everything around you is really disordered and really out of whack. So that's just kind of my little side note disclaimer as we continue this conversation. For those of you who maybe find yourselves on the spectrum somewhere where you are trying all the things and they're not helping, that it's also okay to ask for more help, to ask for help and support that can come alongside of you, either medically, therapeutically, spiritually, all across the board. So just hope you hear, like, we also really support people being discerning around when even the best tools in your toolkit aren't sufficient, and there's no judgment and there is no condemnation, because again, we're in the realm of our bodies and our bodies are speaking to us. And I remember a medical doctor told me once, if you had diabetes, would you take insulin? And I was like, yes, I would. No question. Like, science has helped me understand we get to have support for our bodies where there's a breakdown. So again, it's just felt like I just want to give that little pastoral nudge for those of you who might find yourselves in context where you will try to overcome on your own, and you might need to reach out and pursue some extra support in this season. And that would be a very good, faithful, honoring thing.
Oh, it's so well said. And just to add again, the things we're talking about work, but they don't always work. And we need allies, not only people, but other processes, and maybe biochemical help in terms of helping the uptake of serotonin through what's called an SSRI or an antidepressant. So when we're inviting you to this process, we really are assuming that extremity, but when extremity is added to extremity onto extremity, these are still true, but there better be other adjunctive aids and helps. But let me step in further to say that, okay, when there is ownership through interoception, when there's at least some response of your body lowering, what else? It's kind of like, and so we're gonna mention a number of things, but again, I want to remind you of what Rachael said. Sometimes you can't do these. And yet, knowing they're there, you can come to them at some point, but not at all points. Don't judge yourself for not being able to do one thing, let alone all the things that we're recommending. So one of the things I would say is, this season particularly, you've got to dump burdens that you are not required to carry. Another way of saying that, you got to set boundaries about what you can carry and what you can. I'm reminded of through hikers who begin the Appalachian Trail, and the average, they say, is the average person who begins to hike the Appalachian Trail is carrying about 36 pounds on their back. By the time they have made about 50 miles, they're down to 22 pounds. Well, that's a lot of material to dump. But what they have come to know is you can't do this hike carrying 30, 35 pounds. You will have to get rid of things that are valuable, that are important, And that actually would create some level of ease in your life if you're going to make it through heightened periods of trauma. And that just requires the ability to sit back and go, I love this chair. I don't want to sit on a rock, but I also don't want to carry it. What are the burdens today that are not in the red zone, but might be in the yellow or lesser zone? And sometimes it really requires me to make a list. And you're going to hear me say this quite a bit because I fragment and I can't think well. I have to have an ally called a piece of paper, a pad of paper, or my recently purchased little I don't know what to call it, electronic thing called a Remarkable. All that to say, I need to make lists. I need to have categories right in front of me because I can't think simply and clearly. So being able to go, what do I think I need to do today? And then what 4 or 5 things out of that list can I say, I'd love to have the energy. I'd love to have the ability, but they're not my top priority and they likely won't get done. And can I actually let myself double up on containment in a way in which I'm not carrying what I know at this season I cannot carry?
Mm-hmm. I think that can be really hard for those of us who are fiercely loyal and used to being able to carry, even like, those of us who would hear Dan say, most people go down to 22 and you already know somewhere in your bones, you're like, but I could do the 36. Mm-hmm. I think especially for those of us who might be more in that category of how we have coped with certain things of life, that can feel really hard because it can feel scary. Like, oh, things are really bad if I can't do that. And I think just giving yourself the permission to say, this is the particular season. And it may not feel that way for everyone. And again, that's why we are in community and why we share our resources when maybe we have a little bit more to give. We'll talk about that in a minute. But like just what are some of the things that someday you might be able to pick back up, but today you need to set them down and to trust that provision will come. Maybe not always in the ways that we think, but it's a good, faithful act to be able to say what not only is realistic for me to carry in this season, but what would actually be kind and honoring for me to carry in this season.
And it disrupts perfectionism. I mean, again, that interplay between loyalty and perfectionism of, I have to do this because this is who I am. Right there is a threat to our identity. So the traumas outside of us are opening up a threat to our identity. And it's going to have to be renegotiated, given what I can and cannot do. And I said to a dear friend of mine the other day, look, I'd love to interact with you more, but I've got 15 minutes of energy. I actually have more time, but I have about 15 minutes of energy. Is that enough? And he said, no. And I said, I know. So where are we? Just being able to have those kinds of hard conversations open up the possibility of honoring not only our body, but honoring the relationships around us, being able to set limits. And I know this is I think it's one of the worst swear words that we all feel in our body. And that's the word no. To actually say to people, no, I could be there, but that would require more than I'm able to offer at this point. No. And to tie it, not to, oh, I'm too busy, or no, I just can't, but no, this is what I'm able to bring today, but I cannot guarantee what I can do tomorrow. That's deeply disruptive of, in many ways, my at least idolatry as to what I perceive I should do, what I can do, what's required of me. In that sense, we're beginning to deal with a lot of thought and ideal disintegration. In other words, executive functioning, as we've underscored many times, is deeply affected by trauma. And as I mentioned before, I carry a notebook around. If I have an idea, yeah, it's there, but more along the lines of, oh, I need to get X. I would need to remember what we need allies. And what allies are you using? And I'm grateful. Oh my gosh, grateful that my wife seems to be less memory affected by this period of trauma than I seem to be. So relying upon her and, shall we say, you, Rachel, as how many times have I said to you, did you send me that email?
Numerous.
And just to be again blunt and to say, I know that's frustrating to you, but I have not faced, shall we say, judgment from you, given the reality that you probably know that you send it once and you're probably going to send it a second time. And today, however, I was on it the first time.
Sure.
So even there, to be able to go, I'm going to celebrate that, and I'm not going to turn against myself for needing a bit more help, or maybe a lot more help than I might have 6 months ago or a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think just that sense of again, we're talking about the same things with different language, disintegration, having boundaries, accepting that you can't carry all the things, that your executive functioning isn't going to be as sharp, that you're depleted. The reserves are gone. It's not even that they're low, it's that they're gone. And I won't put that on everyone. Again, if you find that you do have some reserves by the grace of God in this season, it's where, how can, we tell the truth so that the people who can say, you know what, I feel like I can keep carrying this in this particular moment can, and have that option and that choice. But putting off or letting go of what doesn't feel crucial right now is a really kind, faithful act. I also, I think I just want to name this always, obviously the need is far greater than any one of us can meet. And far greater right now, it feels like, than even when we come together in community, we can meet. And we are in the realm of the fishes and the loaves and the mustard seed. And sometimes that's the greatest act of hope and the greatest act of faith. So what can you, I know for myself, I have a basket full of self-care and body care things, an acupressure mat, a neck roller, a foam roller, a jump rope, a back scratcher, a neck warmer, all the things I've collected, a yoga mat. How many of them have I used in this season? Almost zero. And I cognitively know better. The one thing I have been able to consistently try to do is to go on walks. And I think even with those of us who maybe do have a more robust imagination for care, I live in a city that it's not necessarily accessible to just go outside and see mountains and trees and water that used to bring a lot of restoration. But I can go for a walk. And sometimes, like today, our walk is we only have enough time in between meetings to walk to the coffee shop, get a bagel, come back home. Is it what I most long for? No. Is it what my body most needs? No. If I let myself take it, though, does it really actually go such a such a long distance? It does. So what are some of the ways, what are the foods culturally, traditionally, in your family, in your body, that bring you a lot of delight? Who are the people? Maybe you don't have the bandwidth to make a Zoom call with all the people you want to set up a social time with, because we all know we're sick of being on Zoom. Who's one person that it would bring your heart deep delight to be able to connect with? Can you set aside the desire to connect with everyone and then be well, I just won't do it with anyone because I don't have the energy, or nobody has the time, or nobody's available, or who's the one person? Because I think we are in a moment where being faithful to do the one thing when we long to do the 70 things is some of the greatest work right now, because it means we have to grieve. It means we have to feel some of the reality of what we're in. And there is such goodness in saying yes to the one thing, whether it's taking a bath, whether it's playing a game with your kids when you're exhausted, but they'll laugh, and there will be something about having a moment of brevity. There's just not it's not an easy time. And I think some of the ways we sabotage, and that's a word we want to talk about, is like not sabotaging, not creating more trauma by knowing you have thin margins. So like, this is not the time to try to have a really serious conversation with your spouse about this, thematic thing you guys have been dealing with for 20 years. Like, probably in the moment when you're depleted and you have very little margin and you're kind of in fight, flight, or freeze and you're looking for a fight, can you make a different choice? And I think this is a season where we're really prone to sabotage because it gives us a momentary sense of relief. Like, see, what's the point of trying anyway? I know one of the ways I've been sabotaging is I actually do have some care to give people, but I'm looking at all this global need, and I'm someone who's trying to look at the big picture and taking in all the energy and trying to make sense of it. And then I go, you know what? It's just too big. I can't do anything. And then I feel completely overwhelmed and powerless and numb, and I check out. So trying to go, what's some of the noise I need to step away from so that I can actually tend to the people in my real life who need care, that I actually have some care to offer. So I think part of the tending to our bodies in this season is actually being very discerning about what we're taking in. Now, I'm not talking about choosing comfort over discomfort in some of the places we need to grow and be challenged. I'm talking about when you actually overload yourself in order to let yourself out. That's a form of sabotage that's actually going to increase the trauma in this particular season. And this is more my confession than like telling anybody else what they should do.
No, amen. And again, when I think of sabotage, because I have a long history of addiction, it could be alcohol, it could be all forms of adding more work onto my shoulders. But the bottom line is, it's much harder to just say, what can I do in this short period of time that will not be enough? I know it won't be enough, but it's enough for the moment to just take 5 minutes and go outside and feel the wind. Obviously, I live in a very rainy place, but I've got rain gear to go outside when it's raining for 5 minutes and sit in my rain gear and feel the reality of the cool, the cold, the wind. So the things that we can do feel not enough. But in that, I am so prone to sabotage and to say, well, it's not going to be enough. Why bother? Do you see, I'm rejoining powerlessness versus creating a very small but intentional re-engagement with what I do have some sense of influence and affectance over. I can walk for 5 minutes. Oh, but that's not enough. Yeah, well, it's better than flipping through 30 different internet sites in a matter of 10 minutes. Will you begin to honor? I think we've maybe said this to a point of ad nauseum. Will you honor the small in order for the large to, in one sense, come back over a season? And that is the promise of the resurrection. It actually is the promise that we will not be in the particular calamities that we're in. Oh, we'll be in different ones, but we'll also know rescue and restoration. But can we wait, but intentionally engage? That opens the possibility that this sabotage, this depletion, this fragmentation no longer has an ultimate power over us. I think that will make the kind of change where, at least from last week to here, being able to sit outside for 5 minutes, it was a sweet little gift and a reminder that it is good. It is good to be alive. And I want this season for many, many of us to be finished, to be at least largely finished. But knowing it won't be, it can't continue to ramp up my sympathetic system to a point where my allostatic load leads to illness, to disintegration, even more relationally. There has to be a hell no, I will not continue. Heaven, yes, let me take in what can be taken. You've heard us talk often about trauma and the body, and we've got two colleagues that are about to take you into addressing some of the significant complications that come to our body as a result of trauma.
So on April 10th, the Allender Center will be hosting an event called Trauma and the Body that will be hosted by Abby Wong-Hefter and special guest Jenny McGrath. Abby Wong-Hefter is a brilliant therapist and teacher and specialist on the impact of trauma and the body. And Jenny McGrath is a specialist in somatic healing. She's a therapist, a dancer, a yoga instructor. And I think together, the two of them are just going to bring some incredible resources, especially for giving weight to those quieter things that we've been talking about that you might deem not as bad as what other people have suffered, but you know things are manifesting. You can also get CEUs for those of you who are needing CEU credits. So if this is something that you would be interested in, you can find more information at theallendercenter.org. You'll see all the details about pricing, how to register. Check it out. The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.